Conversations with Nicole. Conversations with Nicole. Let's talk about it. Tell me all about it. I'm here. I wanna know what's on your mind. Ooh, the world needs to hear from you, and I'm so glad to have a conversation to reach the nation. And it's all about you. We'll help each other to discover innovative ways to positively change the world. Let's talk about. Let's talk about. Yeah. Let's talk about conversations with Nicole.
Greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to Conversations with Nicole. I am Nicole Everett, your host. And Conversations with Nicole is a talk show based in Tallahassee, Florida, focused on connecting the community through conversations. And today is what I call Mindset Monday. Mindset Monday is an opportunity for you, me, and my guests to talk about whatever it is we want to talk about. And today's topic is self-compassion and relationships. Ooh, self-compassion and relationships. And so we are going to dive in. This is going to be real good. So y'all listen, tag a friend, let them know they need to be on here. We have returning CWN guest Melissa Comeau coming on with us. Listen, Melissa and I are doing double duty today because we were on a live at 6:30 for CPRA and Temple Fit Co. for a mental health literary series. But we here live and in living color and excited and delighted to talk with you all tonight. So if you will, for those of you who may be new to the platform, in the comments, let us know where you are tuning in from by putting your city and state. I will give you a shout out. I see you, cousin Denise in Texas. Thank you for being here. And Commissioner Nick Maddox, congratulations on being reelected as our at-large county commissioner. We appreciate you being on here tonight. So, again, great conversation in store. So, please, we are live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on the Greater Works Network on RokuTV. So, tell a friend they want to be on here. Melissa is all things relationship, okay? So she's going to give you the real as it relates to this. All right. So while those of you who are tuning in are logging in, you're welcome, Nick. I'm going to go ahead and read her bio for those of you who may have missed her during the last visit. So Melissa has 15 years of experience working with couples, individuals, and groups. She has a private practice, which is Heartfelt Counseling Center, where she specializes in relationship concerns. Her experience working in college counseling centers, focusing on work with young adults, is where her concerns began to develop as it relates to relationship issues. She started her career working in community mental health and nonprofit agencies, including domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy agencies. And she received training in identifying unhealthy and toxic dynamics in relationships. She has a passion for working with individuals and couples with diverse backgrounds and believes in the importance of multiculturalism. Melissa is active in increasing diversity awareness as the diversity chair for the Central Florida Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, where she helps put together panel discussions such as Black mental health, Asian mental health, and cross-cultural couples counseling. She received her bachelor's in psychology, master's of science degree in education, specialist degree in mental health counseling at the Florida State University. Go Noles. Melissa holds licenses and certifications as a licensed mental health counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist, and national certified counselor. Melissa is also a qualified supervisor. So help me welcome Miss Melissa Comeau.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Yeah.
So tell the people who may not know you, who is Melissa Comeau?
Yeah, every time I get this question, because we have to like write bios all the time and like for professional stuff, I always think about what am I going to say first about the personal stuff, and I always end up saying the same thing. I am a Haitian American from South Florida. I am a wife and mother. My son is 3 years old, and I am a sister, a daughter, a friend, and even though therapy is a big part of my work, just in general, just a passion for wellness and relationships is. So whether I'm talking about it with friends or I'm talking about with a client, I'm talking about it. So that's kind of like how that flows for me.
Love it, love it, love it. And you talk about it so well. So I'm so glad that you have agreed to come back and join us to talk about this very important topic. So let me give a couple more shout outs. I see you, Tracy Golay here in Tally. Thanks for being here. My mom down in Miami. Thank you for being here, Mom. And so folks are saying welcome and hello.
Hello,
Yes.
hello.
So before we get started, I gotta read my disclaimer because we don't want people to get it twisted. This is not counseling. I know it's good like counseling, but it's not, right? Because we still want you to connect with a clinician. So all topics past, present, and future on Conversations with Nicole are for informational purposes only. They are not to be used as a diagnosis for treatment or an answer to any personal issues related to the topic being discussed before, during, or after the program. All right. All right, we got Miss Vanessa on here. Hey, Vanessa. All right, good deal. So, self-compassion. Self-compassion in relationships. So, I'm gonna pull the audience in right from jump. Like, so what do y'all think of self-compassion is? When you hear the word self-compassion, what do you think of? In the comments, let us know. Self-compassion, what does that mean? What does it mean to you? Look, moreover, do you show yourself compassion?
That's a good follow. Yeah, it's a good follow question.
That's the real question.
I'm curious to see what they say, because I feel like it's one of those things that you hear all the time, but maybe you don't always know what it is, or how to describe it, maybe.
Well, I did do a little Googling.
you cheated, Nicole?
I was curious. I was curious. I mean, you put a self in front of a word, just means whatever the word is.
That's true.
Doing it for yourself.
That's a great point. It's so true.
All right, y'all mighty quiet. Well, we're gonna go ahead and let Miss Melissa give us some insight.
Well, you actually gave us a good intro to that, Nicole. It's the self part of compassion, right? So it's turning compassion inward. Is like another way of looking at it. It's being kind to yourself. It is being understanding of yourself. It's giving yourself grace. It's oftentimes what we can do more easily to a friend or for a friend than sometimes we can do for ourselves. And so that's the way I would start off, I guess, as far as the way we want to think about self-compassion is that compassion you would give to a friend, hopefully, that you start giving more to yourself if you don't do that enough, of course. So
yes. So one of my mentees, Miss Tatiana, used to tell me often to be kind to myself because I would be sometimes hard on myself. As relates to just maybe goals or aspirations or things that I wanted to do or interactions or experiences that I had. Because I'm very introspective. And I try to be pretty self-aware. And with that, I can't be hard on myself.
Yeah. And one thing that, and back up, I'm gonna say a couple things about it. So the reason that I wanted to talk about self-compassion, or I talk about it in my clinical work, I talk about it on my content on social media, is because it's one of those things that I think we kind of not take for granted, but I feel like because I'm a therapist, I feel like I hear a lot of what's in people's head because it's confidential, right? So they're sharing things with you that they probably wouldn't share with people in their lives. And so that's a theme, honestly, that I've seen in a lot of my client work is how hard people are on themselves. And of course, we don't know, if I wasn't a therapist, I wouldn't know, right? Because they wouldn't be telling me probably. And so I think one of the things I noticed about self-compassion is that why it's so important is because how much people are critical of themselves. And it's people that you wouldn't, because most of my clients are professional Black women. I see couples and individuals, college educated. Not to say that if you weren't, but these are people that you would see on the outside as confident. You know what I mean? You'd be like, oh, if I were to look at like their bio or their social media, which I don't because I can't. That's confidential. But if I were going to look at how they present to me on screen, because I do virtual, or what they write as far as their family or their background or what they do for work, anything that you would just kind of pick up on. Or even how they sound on the phone on the consultation, right? There's a lot of things that you just are kind of putting together. But then as I get to know them, which I'm always grateful for about how transparent my clients are with me as I build rapport with them, because it's not easy stuff to talk about that, these are people you would think, are so confident, but they, inside there's a lot of stuff that they don't share with other people or they don't share with very many people. And so that's what I thought that was so interesting. It's like, the compassion comes in because of how critical we can be to ourselves. And I don't think we talk about it enough because I think there's this idea that we want to present a certain way and don't want to share with people that vulnerable side of, man, I'm having a tough time,
Right.
like that's hard for people to say. So that's part of why I'm passionate about talking about it, because I'm seeing that more and more and to people that we would look on the outside and not think that they think that way about themselves. I think that's the thing.
Indeed. Tracy said, accept that we are always a work in progress. Right?
Yeah. Important.
It is. So let me just start by saying what we've already shared right now is huge, right? Especially for people who tend to be perfectionists or critical of themselves or want to present a certain way. And so that by itself, like coming to the place of being kind, giving yourself grace, that's huge, right?
It is huge. And one of the things that I also want to highlight with the idea of self-compassion is that it comes from the reason that we have the term and that we want to practice it is because it's something that is needed when there is pain, essentially, right? Because there's a lot of terms that we use, as you were saying, Nicole, that has self in front of it. Like you think of self-esteem, you think of self-confidence, you think of self-love, like all these buzz terms, that. And I feel like self-compassion is not quite a buzz term yet, but it's probably about to be one kind of thing. But there's all these self terms that we have, and this is the only one that talks about how you treat yourself, in particular when you're going through pain or you're going through some type of discomfort or you did something that you're ashamed of or whatever those things. So it's literally your relationship with yourself. Like it's how you treat yourself. And so I think it's one of those things that is important because that's where it's needed the most, right? Is when we are critical of ourselves, because there are some, and that concept can be confusing for people because again, not only do they present as confident, but they also feel confident in certain areas of their life, right? And like, I feel I'm good at doing this, I'm good at doing that. There's a lot of external elements to the confidence part of it. But no one's perfect. As you said, perfectionism is a huge thing. So no one's perfect. So what happens when things don't go as planned or it didn't go as well as you had hoped, or maybe you did something that was a mistake and so you have to deal with it and take responsibility for it? Like, what do you do in those moments of discomfort, right? And self-esteem don't tell you what to do. Self-confidence will tell you what, like these things will tell you what to do because there's this idea that you're supposed to forever and always be that, like confident, esteemed, love yourself. And none of those terms give you room for like when that doesn't happen or when you don't feel it. Like, what do you actually do? Because it happens, I hear people talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
That's why I think the term is so important, because the other self terms are good for upliftment, like how to hopefully kind of strive to be, but then we know that's not going to always be the case,
So I wonder if the viewers, do you all feel that? I mean, are you receiving it the way Melissa is sharing in terms of, this particular word again, allows us to hold space for ourselves or have grace for ourselves, where the others don't necessarily give us a whole lot of room for that. And so there is, I don't know, this is almost like the hack in a way.
Yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think the other piece of it is I would love to hear what the audience thinks, but I think the words are used so interchangeably that I don't think people actually say and think like, I mean, I do it because I'm teaching people about it in therapy, but
Right.
otherwise I would be using it all types of ways: esteem, love, like whatever. It all sounds good, kind of thing. And so it's definitely not something that I think typically people kind of like notice a difference about, because it all is coming from a place of positivity. I think that's kind of like how we think of it in general.
Yes.
But yeah, it is. I am curious to hear what the audience thinks about the term and how
All
they think
right.
of it.
So Denise says, I'm number one and I will take care of me all the time. All right.
Mhm.
Dee Dee said, yes, thanks for the breakdown. I've never heard it broken down like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's definitely something to consider.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then I think as we move on in the conversation as it relates to relationships, right? Because now
Mhm.
you're talking about not only how you're relating to yourself, but how
Mhm.
you're relating to someone else and how they are relating to you.
Mhm.
And I say all the time that our culture is not really for single people; it's for couples. Um,
Mm.
it definitely promotes couples and being in relationship.
Mm.
But with that being said, I think there's a lot of pressure for people to not be single. Um,
Mm.
you know, it's kind of looked down upon
Mhm.
are single or alone, and it's like, what's
Judgment.
wrong with you?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so if you maybe, and I'm probably jumping the gun right now, but if you maybe, or of somebody who maybe will stay in a relationship where
Mhm.
aren't receiving the compassion because they have a fear of being alone, then
Mhm.
are you, bold, brave enough to show yourself compassion to not be in a relationship?
I got you. Yeah, I see that, because I think what I'm hearing you say, Nicole, too, is like society's judgment potentially on single people in that example that you're giving. And so if you're somebody who is okay with being single or are accepting of your singleness until you find somebody, but you still have these messages going on, is how much of that do we actually internalize, right? So maybe it wasn't a judgment of yourself before, but maybe you went to that Thanksgiving holiday party with your family or something where somebody reminds you that you're single, and you're like, I actually was okay with being single yesterday until I came into this room. and,
Exactly.
and so now
Yes.
it becomes something you start to carry that as your, now it was a judgment outside of yourself. Now it becomes a self-judgment or criticism.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, compassion would be a great thing to practice in that moment, right? Because the thing with all the other self terms, most of them are external, right? So self-confidence is external, even self-esteem to some extent, because it's about like how you feel about yourself based on things that you do.
Hmm.
And so through my kind of research of the terms, self-worth is probably one, and then self-compassion are the only two I could find that is more about your internal view, treatment of yourself. Everything else is tied some type of way to, even self-love is about you appreciate yourself because you're trying to be better or something. Like everything is connected to something else.
Hmm.
Even though it starts off with the self. So when you think about the idea of being single, maybe you had your own criticism of yourself before and maybe got heightened when other people share their views or opinions, or maybe you're fine with it. And then again, that becomes something that now you're carrying because of what you not just are thinking, but people may actually be telling you literally, passing judgment on you. And so then having to remind yourself wherever it is that you do stand. And also that if you're single and you want a relationship, that's okay too, right? And to not feel like you have to act like you don't want one. I think
Hmm.
there's always a way that we can go with it that's not us. So I think it's finding out what is the thing that you want to stand on when it comes to singleness or whatever you're experiencing.
Right.
And then finding where compassion needs to be in those situations if you're carrying judgment because of it, so to speak. That's a
Absolutely.
really good, there's a lot of things we take from other people that wasn't ours to begin with.
Hmm. Indeed. All right. So, just really quick for those of you who are just joining us, I see you, Etheria. Hey there, Susan. And hey there, Lisa. Thank y'all for joining us. We're talking about self compassion in
Mhm.
relationships. So, we just finished kind of defining self-compassion, being kind to yourself, giving yourself grace, and just not being so hard on yourself. Right.
Yeah, that's it. How you treat yourself, in particular in times of pain or discomfort, because that's when people tend to be the most critical, is when they're not, feeling too well. And so that's when self-compassion can be like the antidote to whatever that self-criticism is that's going on for you.
Right. So let's, I guess, segue somewhat into the relationship realm in terms of self-compassion. Why is it important for you to have self-compassion in relationships?
Yeah, for part of what you said too earlier, Nicole, the perfectionism part, or feeling like you can't make mistakes, right? And so the reason I like talking about self-compassion too is not only am I noticing clients actually coming in with criticism and how that's like creating anxiety and different things, but it's also playing a part in their relationship, right? Because of how they're experiencing their internal world is eventually going to come out in their external, right? And so if they are someone, and I'll just use like something that's more concrete, I guess, to make it simpler. So if someone who, let's say, experiences anxiety, for example, and with people who experience anxiety, they have a lot of fearful thoughts, judgmental thoughts, a lot about themselves. And so if they're carrying that and they're in, let's say, in a relationship, and we're talking about romantic, but this could really be in anything, friendship, whatever, any close, intimate relationship. I think if it's not close and intimate, that people can kind of manage it better because there's a distance. But if there's any type of closeness, friendship, romantic or otherwise, then it's, you're closer, so you can kind of experience each other more, right? And so if someone is experiencing anxiety, some of the symptoms may include, self-critical thoughts, and they're in a relationship, and they start to experience things that create some type of worry, right? Because we all worry, like even if you don't have anxiety, we all worry about something. And if you're in a relationship, you're worried about something in the relationship at some point. And so if you are experiencing worry at some point in the relationship, and then you already are experiencing self-critical thoughts and you came into the relationship with that, then when not if, but when things come up, you'll start to see the situation that come up in a relationship kind of trigger that self-criticism, that worry, whatever the kind of discomfort is. And then that creates a situation that people start making decisions off that feeling, right? So, and that may have nothing to do with, it may or may not have something to do with the relationship itself, but it becomes something now, because before it was something that was kind of within you, and now it's kind of playing out in the relationship in some way, which again could be something directly triggered from the relationship itself, or something that is perceived, but not actually the case that's going on. And so I've noticed that when people can self-reflect and see, okay, when am I being triggered? What is it doing, within me? And then how is that affecting how I act outward? Then they feel more empowered, I feel like, about like what they can do about it. And it becomes less of a my partner, or my friend or whoever, and more of a like, oh, I didn't know I was feeling that way about that situation until I looked into it, further. And so that's why ultimately, like, whatever happening with you on the inside, and we can use all different types of situations and scenarios that we can talk about tonight, but that's essentially like why I talk about it so directly, and why I include it in my work with couples and with individuals. Because, ultimately when we feel bad, we don't act too great. You know what I mean? So like if we're feeling bad about ourselves or something that we did, it's harder to apologize. Like it's harder to like empathize with your partner because you're in your feelings. And there's so many things blocking it, that telling yourself that it's okay. Like it's okay that you made a mistake. It's okay that you're not happy. It's okay. Give yourself that compassion to create room for change, because otherwise you're just going to be in that cycle, just going, just going.
So is that, I'm trying to pull our viewers in. Does that resonate with anybody? John said, and hey, John, thanks for being here. He said we should constantly speak to our inner selves, And so, we are speaking to ourselves each time we talk. I mean, it's ourselves that hear what we are saying, even though we may be talking to someone else. So we gotta, watch what we're saying. Right?
And so I love what John's saying and what you're adding, Nicole, too, because I talk about that as well, that like you with yourself all the time. Like we've heard that before, like you with yourself all the time. And so if you're like feeding yourself, that self-dialogue that's just damaging, to you, you probably wouldn't be with a friend who do that to you. You know what I mean? Like if you had a friend that was like talking bad about you all day, you would be quick to be like, you know. But when it's ourselves, you know, we kind of like, well, number one, we're with ourselves, so we hear the thoughts, but we also kind of like give a pass for that. I feel like versus like really looking at ourselves in the mirror and say like, how is this helping me? You know, essentially.
You know, I will be transparent. Definitely, there's a humility about myself that kind of causes me to do some of what you just mentioned. In terms of like playing myself down and not really, you know, exalting me or what have you. So, and you know, I blame all of that on humility, right? It's like I'm trying not to think too highly of myself or what have you, right? So I just,
oh, I see. Like kind of like a downplaying. Yeah, no, I get that, and that's a slippery slope too, right? Because it's like, yeah, you definitely, you know, don't want to be arrogant. I guess that's the opposite of being humble is being arrogant.
right.
But at the same time, I think we can give room for all of it, right? So that you can still be this great person doing these great things, but also know that you're not perfect and you're not better than anybody, and you know all that type of stuff.
Right.
And also, if something happens, if you're in discomfort, you can also give yourself grace. And that's what we're talking about too, Nicole. What's coming to mind is that I think that's one of the troubles we have as individuals is doing the both and. I feel like we kind of feel like we have to pick one, like kind of what you're saying, like, well, if I'm not humble, then that means I'm arrogant, or you know, something like that. Like it has to be the opposite. And I think it's hard for us to find space for, I guess, more than one thing at a time.
For sure. John said, I love it when you're transparent. You are powerful. Thank you, John. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
My sister is on. She said, definitely downplay myself. So I don't know if we get that from my mom. I think we do a little bit, to be quite honest with you. But, you know, and not to, you know, throw mom under the bus, but
all well intentions, right?
Right. Some things are like, you know, nurture as opposed to nature in the environment that you witness or are exposed to, right?
Yeah. Well, I think with that, even with the parenting thing, I think like we learn from our caregivers and learn from our close relatives and whoever was around us growing up. And, you know, as young people, when we're picking up messages, sometimes it's not like what people say to you directly. Like, so if, you know, the message is like to be humble or to make sure that you're always there for other people. Like when you hear that, I don't think like the parents or caregivers aren't saying, well, always be there for other people means don't be there for yourself. But as a young person, nobody tells you that that's okay. So all you keep hearing is, well, you gotta be there for, and especially if you're of the Black culture, I'm Caribbean, I'm Haitian, so there's a lot of you know, we're community people, collective people, right? So we're always there for others, you know, so to speak. But with that, we automatically take that as then the opposite is not good. So if I'm told that like I have to do this, like I have to be a good student, right? Do well in school all the time, then we add whatever the extreme is, because no one really teaches us that it's okay to sometimes not always be good in school. Because it's like, well, because when we're teaching younger people like who don't have that nuanced thinking, you know, it kind of makes sense developmentally. Like you don't, you know, like if you say, oh, never cross the street, you know, what if the fire right here? You got to cross the street. You got to look both ways and make sure you can make it across. You know, like we just teach one thing, but then we don't necessarily go back and like always teach the other piece of it. And so we get locked into this like black or white thinking that gets kind of more, you know, that gets bigger as we get older, but then we don't realize it becomes an issue till we actually get older. We're like,
right, okay, for sure.
Well, and nobody told me this was okay. They kept telling me this part, you know.
Exactly. I mean, no, I mean, but you're hitting it head on, because I think that's it. Maybe, you know, we were indoctrinated with those messages of looking out for other people and not looking out for ourselves. We weren't really told to look out for ourselves. I think the thought was that was understood.
Yeah, it's an assumption. But then if you really think about it, like if you think about all the messages that we got, let's say that's one of the ones you're talking about, like when you say that it was assumed that it would be understood, but then we also, not only did we have no one tell us, but no one actually showed it to us, right? So like if we learn from our family to be there for other people, we'll use that, because I think a lot of people can relate to that. We probably can't think of too many. I mean, I'm gonna use women because I feel like that's just like another, make it concrete. Let's say, you know, women are the caregiver, the this, that, and that. You see mama do it, grandma do it, auntie do it. and then the expectation is that now when it's us, we're supposed to figure it out. But then not only did no one tell us, but no one is actually doing it in our presence. So it's like, how are we supposed to know that it's okay to be confident and not only be humble? How are we supposed to know it's okay to take care of ourselves if no one around us is taking care of themselves, at least not in front of us? And so it's one of those messages that's like, we know there's something off as we get older, but we don't know exactly what it is, you know?
Yeah, no, that's good. Marjorie said she does the same thing. She uses it to fuel herself to do more. I never want to think too highly of myself and get comfortable. Yeah, I think adopting that perspective can be healthy to combat, you know, being humble to the point of maybe being a doormat. Right.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think it's more so, anything in excess is not healthy, right? So if you feel like you're doing it to the detriment of yourself, I think that's the part that, becomes a concern. So definitely, yeah, I think being humble is good, and wanting to check yourself, so to speak, and make sure that you're always improving. It kind of reminds me of like the concept of tough love. I talk to my clients about that a lot because a lot of my clients are Black too.
Right.
And so, a lot of us grew up in environments that had tough love, so to speak. And I've heard clients say exactly that. Like, I don't want to be too easy on myself. I want to make sure I'm always doing better, blah, blah, blah. And again, there's not wrong or bad, but I think what happens in those moments when we do make a mistake or we don't perform at the highest possible potential that particular day, it's like, and where's the room for in this case, self-compassion, right? Because there can become a time where it becomes toxic, because then you're just trying to chase this, again, maybe perfectionism becomes a thing, because there's no room for you to just be human, essentially.
Alethea, hey there. She said the indoctrination can impact the critical thinking piece. Marjorie is also of Haitian descent. She said, and yes, our Haitian parents never told us we did a great job. They asked us why we couldn't do more. They also compare us to other people's children in the community to downplay our accomplishment. That thought process stuck with me even today.
Yeah. And I think she just talked about the whole of not wanting to, not in this comment, but I think it was before, not wanting to think too highly or of herself, right? Yeah. So so those two comments, you can link them together and you can literally see the root of kind of where it came from, So that's that, again, that all or nothing thinking. It's like, okay, so I can't be happy with myself and also want to work hard. I can't be, appreciate my accomplishment and want to do more. Like it's a weird thing.
It is. All right. So for those of you who are just joining me, I have Miss Melissa Comeau on, and we are talking about self-compassion and relationships. And so, again, once you kind of now can turn to yourself and give yourself grace and not be too hard on yourself when you're relating to someone. If maybe they aren't showing you compassion, can you be compassionate towards yourself such that you can maybe remove yourself or express to them in a, how do I want to say this? In a firm but loving way, truth and love, right? A firm but loving way about how you should be treated, right? Because I say always teach people how to treat us.
Yeah, no, that's good. So part of what I'm hearing you say is we're talking about self-compassion, right? Which starts with us. So how you treat yourself, especially in times of pain and discomfort. And also to the relationship component that we're adding in now to the conversation of, people who, so if you're somebody, let's say you're trying to work real hard on like the self-compassion, you heard Melissa on, Nicole's show talking about this, and you about to practice this today. And then you find yourself in situations where there's people that's not being compassionate with you, right? So that's not necessarily helping your practice. And so what I'm hearing from Nicole's kind of scenario question is, how do you handle those situations when the people in your life are not being compassionate with you, and you're trying to work on that yourself, right? Kind of thing. And so having to communicate with them. I think I talked about boundaries with one of your other shows, not this one, but the Singles Mingle. We talk about boundaries a lot, right? So that's a good place for boundary setting of, essentially that you, of course you can communicate that to them, say, this, hurts my feelings, or I don't appreciate when you say it this way, or, this bothers me when you talk to me like this or whatever, kind of letting them know kind of how it's making you feel. They would, in that way you would be vulnerable a little bit by saying that it bothers you, of course. I know some people are not okay with that, but, for them to understand kind of where you're coming from would be helpful, to do that. I think the most important thing before we even get to like how to talk to them about it, because, we can complete that part, which is important, is to recognize how what they're doing is impacting you. Because that's your motivator, right? So like, because initially when you get the critical comment or the judgment or whatever, you feel something, you feel, upset, angry, sad, whatever. And so then you have to decide, okay, do I say something? Do I not say something? Right. And I think the thing that helps people to determine, if they should or shouldn't and how they should is how it's actually impacting you. I think what tends to happen is that people hear the thing or get the experience that, from the person that's being judgmental or whatever, and they have an automatic feeling, but then they dismiss it. And then it's like, but then they still feel like they have to do something about it, but they haven't really looked at what's bothering me about this, how much is bothering me, is it worth talking about, that kind of thing. And so I think if you really explore like how much is impacting you, you won't be able to ignore it, because then you're like, this person has been in my life for all this time and I haven't noticed this, or I haven't paid attention to this. And this is part of the reason why I can't be self-compassionate, is because I'm walking into these spaces with people being critical all the day, that whole time. You know what I mean? So I think once you know how much it is, because then it's hard at that point, it's going to be hard to turn away, because then you're like thinking about all the situations and you don't ignore it, or you try to set boundaries, but it wasn't respected. And so that's your motivator now to kind of find the strength, so to speak, right? Because every relationship is different, right?
Right.
A relative versus a partner versus a friend, like it's all different dynamics. But you won't really be able to like ignore it as easily, because you're like really facing like how much is tearing you down, which sounds kind of sad, but if that's part of the reality, that's part of the reality,
Yeah. So Whitney, who's here in Tally, thank you, Whitney, for being here. Whitney just started her own podcast last Friday. So congratulations. She said, when I embrace self-love, I created boundaries.
And I am so happy she's talking about self-love, because this goes back to our first part of the conversation about like all those self-love, all those self-words are great. Self-love, self-confidence, self-esteem. And so those give us motivation. And that's exactly, and what she's saying is actually what self-love is, which is like doing things to make your life better because you love yourself, doing things to make your experience of your life better because you want to see your life improve, essentially. Like you want to see your experience improve outside of yourself, because you care about yourself so much, right? And so with the boundaries, that is also a form of what they call self-care, right? You're caring for yourself because you're not letting people go past a certain point, so to speak. And then the self-compassion again comes in when things don't go so well, and then is that you're being your own worst enemy, right? So it's more like the you with you, kind of thing.
For sure. Kasi Victor said something that I thought was worth repeating. Learning to give ourselves grace that we tend to give others allows us safety and flexibility. Very early lesson I learned.
That's my brother-in-law. Hey, Cozy.
Oh, okay. Hey.
I appreciate it. Yeah, he's definitely right. And that's kind of what I was speaking to before, like the flexibility, the room to make change, right? Because judgment restricts us.
Yes.
Right. And then we're talking about self-compassion tonight, but we can kind of do other words too. But self-compassion, what he said, creates flexibility and room to change, right? Because it's almost like we can use a child as an example. Okay, I have a 3-year-old, so a lot of child examples in my mind. But when you're teaching discipline, like you're teaching them, how to say please, how to say thank you, how to say sorry, all those different things. But as a child, they're still learning how to regulate their own emotions. I mean, shoot, we also try to regulate sometimes as adults, but definitely as a child. And so when children are feeling bad, you almost can't get them to do really anything, right? Because they feel so bad and they don't know how to contain it. The logic is like throws out the window, kind of thing. And so part of parenting is actually helping them to learn how to regulate, so they can hear the teaching or whatever it is you're trying to teach them to do or not do, so they can practice it to do it, right? And so just as a child, when they don't feel good, they don't want to do anything. They just want to sit there and cry and be upset. In an adult version of that, it's if you're in a relationship, for example, and your partner comes to you and says, hey, it really bothered me that you did this. But then in your head, you're just beating yourself up over, oh my God, like I didn't mean this, blah, blah. And then so you're not even really hearing what your partner is saying, just like the 3-year-old. They're not even hearing what the person is saying, what their caregiver is saying to help them learn from what they did, because they're so stuck in like, oh my God, I'm in trouble, I'm upset, whatever. Same thing with the adult example of their partner coming with a report of something that they didn't like. And so the rigid inflexibility, as Cozy was mentioning, is a good example of that, because it restricts us, because now we're like in that mental, emotional type box of just like this, just the stress basically is what it is. And so then it doesn't create any room for movement. But once you're able to say, okay, that wasn't my intention, or I'm so sorry I made the person feel that way, I want to learn from this, I'm not perfect, any of the things that kind of help you move from that place of restriction to actually hear the message or hear the issue, to talk about it, to make it actually better, because that's what's going to make you feel better at the end of the day, is actually go through the situation to make it better. But it's hard to make it better if we're just in our heads the whole time, like a 3-year-old.
Yes. Whitney said, knowing and respecting my boundaries help me to create them with the people I love. I don't allow other people's feelings to trump mine.
Yeah, I'm with Whitney with these boundaries. Y'all know I talk about boundaries too. It's so important. It's so important, because we don't want people to think it's okay to treat us a particular way. But it starts with us first. We gotta do it first.
It does. So we have to set those boundaries for ourselves as well, not just for
That's
people,
true.
but it's for ourselves, so that
point.
we will stay committed to our commitments.
No, I love that. Yeah, and that goes back to the self part, right? You're right, because we do talk about boundaries a lot with other people. But it is, I mean, the boundaries for other people is for us too. But the way you're saying it, I think it hits home a little bit more, because it's about holding yourself accountable, or following through the things to do for yourself to make your situation better. No, for sure, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So we sit with ourselves. We kind of examine our thoughts, our feelings about the treatment that we've received or what have you. Now, how do we get to the point of expressing to our intimate partner, this, I didn't like the way I felt when you said or did this, or that kind of reminds me of the question we had in a talk we had earlier, in a mental health literacy thing we did this afternoon. And so one of the things that I think I said it, or I don't know if it came out in the conversation of basically being able to let them know, but before you let them know, to check with yourself about what about the situation is bothering you. So if you're somebody who you're in a relationship and you want to express a grievance, we'll just call it that, something that's bothering you about a situation. I think a lot of times we just react. We felt bad about something, and for some people they don't talk automatically; they hold it in first and then they say. But either way, there sometimes isn't a lot of reflection about what about the situation bothered the person. And so I think having that insight can be helpful, because when you're having the conversation, it avoids people going in circles. That's what I noticed with couples a lot of times when they're communicating about things, is that they're sharing, they may or may not be, but there's a conversation about what's bothering them possibly. And then in that conversation, there isn't really understanding of what is bothering them about it. And then they get a pushback from their partner about, because they don't understand, like, why are you upset about this, kind of thing. And because there isn't much self-reflection, and they can't really report that back, and it just becomes like, well, I just didn't like it because of this, and they give maybe some type of answers, but it's not clear as to what's at the root of it or the core of it. And not that we all have to have this wonderful insight to have these conversations, but really just a set intention. Like if you are going to set or express a grievance, and having at least somewhat of a sense of why it bothers you, versus it being like, well, I just didn't like it, or I told you this already and you're still doing it. Like anything that feels surface is not going to really get to a deep enough conversation to make a change, and more importantly, allow the change to last. Because you can tell a partner something and they can change it for that time, but then if they don't understand why, it's going to go out the window. They're going to be like, oh, okay, keep doing what I was doing before. It's going to come back. So Karita, I see your question. I'm going to get to it in just a minute. Kasi said, I imagine how chaotic a football or basketball game would be without the boundaries of the field or court. Great example. They help everyone and exist for a reason. Trust the process.
Yes, it's really important. And I think Whitney was alluding to it as well, that setting boundaries is self-love, but it's also self-compassion too, right? It's like taking care of yourself in a way that says, okay, if self-compassion is there to help you move through difficult times and challenging situations that may create discomfort, then the boundaries are there to let you know, okay, this is my limit, whether that's towards yourself or to other people, of your limit of how much you can tolerate or how much you're okay with, whether that's emotionally, physically, whatever that might be. So they really do. And it's so funny because I talk about boundaries a lot and self-compassion a lot with my clients. It's actually my framework I talk to them about. And I'm like reminded, like, yeah, this is why I talk about them so much, because they're both necessary and they kind of play off of each other.
For sure. So Karita had a question. She said, can you give any tools to use to find a way to self-love?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with self-love is one of those things where, so I keep going back to just in Nicole, because I thought it was so profound, but so simple, of like putting the self in front of the love, kind of thing. So if you think about, the people in your life, let's say that you love, so to speak, how do you express that love to those people, essentially, and how then in turn you turn that inward and show that love towards yourself, right? And so that's why I love the self-compassion concept so much, is because it, like, if you leave tonight and you forget like all the different things that we talked about, if you just think about self-compassion being treating yourself like your own friend, I don't think it's going to be harder to forget it. Because if you think about the friends in your life, of course we don't have, not all friendships are perfect, but if you think about the people that you truly trust, admire, are close with, you can depend on them. If you think about an experience in that relationship and then think about giving that to yourself, that's going to stick with you longer. The words, I know we're talking a lot of words tonight and things like that, but really it's about the experience. And so if you tap in, that's why the self-compassion, treating yourself like a friend, sticks with people, at least when I talk to them, because when they think about a friend or relative that was so kind to them and gracious, and maybe they told them like something that they did that was, oh my God, they were so ashamed of it or whatever, or they know so much about them and they still treat them like whatever the things that they think about of that person or a few people who still uplift them despite of. That's the whole thing. It's like the self-love thing comes from still wanting to kind of care for yourself despite of these things. And self-compassion is that in the moments when I'm in discomfort, how do I pull out that self-love and that compassion for myself and that kindness? The same not only I would do from somebody else, but more importantly, what I feel like I get hopefully from a few people in my life, in my lifetime, to be able to kind of access that experience.
For sure. Way More TV said, in my opinion, in a loving and healthy relationship, which we all desire to have, that safe space to express ourselves with no judgment.
Key. That's
Yeah.
key, very key.
Yes, we do. But the reality is, a lot of times folks are caught up on their side of their point of view, their perspective, being right.
That's true.
All of that. And I say, and I should have said this on our last show, an hour or two ago, but it was brought home about, if we are in a relationship, and particularly in marriage, because I talk to a lot of married people, but it should be us against the issue, not us against each other, right? Like, we're on the same team. How can we work through this to find a solution or several solutions? If the first one, plan A, doesn't work, let's move on to plan B. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think, when you think about the relationship part of it, when you said that, you said that that's nice, but people don't always do it all the time. I think you were just saying, Nicole. It kind of reminds me when I do couples work, those tough moments where, and honestly, I'll take a step back and say most of the time in relationships, and there's actually research in the therapy world that talks about this, where there's a phenomenon of like, basically the fact that you're having the same argument over and over again, just different situations. People actually come in and say that, like, I feel like we always talking about the same thing, arguing about the same thing, because it is, on a lot of levels, it's disguised as something else. And so in those moments when, yes, we want to engage in self-love and want to love each other and do all the things, as Nicole said, sometimes people just want to stay on their side of their aisle. That does make it hard to bring togetherness, so to speak. And I've been talking to my clients lately about, I've just been on this trip of trying to figure out, I'm just going to just be transparent as a therapist, how to figure out words to help people transform their experience. And the more I try to find the words, the more I realize that the words don't exist. And the reason that they don't exist is because the experiences of the person. So me as an outside trying to help them figure out like, okay, well, how can I get them to empathize? And how can I get them to, communicate better? And how can I get them to see each other's side? And how can I get them off their side of the aisle and to each other? Like all these things is like, I'm doing it and we're figuring it out. But then I started realizing it's their experience. Like they like only they know what it feels like to be together. Only they know what it feels like to be separate. And so when I started saying and so instead of taking on me, like as a therapist, empowering them and saying, and you explore your experience. Like, what does it feel like when you're at odds? What does it feel like when you're not talking for days? Like, what does that feel like?
So I got a whole other thought about that, which I will talk to you about offline, but I'm just going to say this and I'm going to leave it. We need to slow these conversations like way down. And when I say slow them down, I mean, we need to be defining these words because you might be talking about compassion and think of it a whole different way from how I define it.
Very true.
You know what I'm saying? But we don't take time to do that. And that's why we got a whole lot of misunderstandings going on.
No, and I'm glad you paused me to say that because that's literally what I tell clients. I say to them, you need to slow the process down. I'm usually talking about emotionally, but it really could apply to anything because I always think of, emotions are what's driving it. That's my view. So, but that includes the conversation, right? Because you can do a lot if you create time and space to do it. But if you just react, then you're going to get the same thing you've been getting.
I'm about to shout. Don't get me started. All right. let me go over here to Facebook user, which I think is Michael Cork. He said, be intentional about self-love. Make time for it. Make sure it's a priority. Address any unresolved trauma, insecurities, bitterness, and or resentment and issues with rejection. Loving yourself is hidden behind all the hurt and pain. Start there. Woo.
So I'm going to jump in again, Facebook user. Great stuff. Can you leave his comment up there? So address any unresolved trauma, insecurities, bitterness, and or resentment and issues with rejection. Mm-hmm. Yes. Deal with your stuff, right? And I just want to add that the reason that people have difficulty dealing with their stuff is because of their own judgment. And the way to crack that door open is to practice the self-compassion that the trauma comes with shame, the insecurities come with embarrassment, the bitterness comes with not being happy with yourself, the resentment, you want your life to be different. There's all these things that, because you see, I don't know if it's a he or she, they said a lot here.
It's actually Alonzo Morris, who was just on.
Oh, he was just on the show with us. That's a lot, and so, and I always think of, and Alonzo's a therapist as well. So thinking about like what, if you're a therapist, but if you're just you as a person, like what is keeping us stuck from working through those things? Mm-hmm. And the more I work with people, it's just how they feel about themselves because of those things. Right. It goes back to the whole 3-year-old example. It's like when I feel bad about myself, I don't want to do nothing. I don't want to say sorry. I just want to go curl up in a corner somewhere, essentially act like it just didn't happen and go away. And that's what people do in couples all the time. Yep. Go to their corners, act like it didn't happen, and try to come back and act like everything's okay. Because we don't want to sit with the discomfort of not only maybe what our partner did, but actually, because we don't want to feel, if our partner does something, we don't want to feel bad about that. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you this. We'll be fine feeling bad about that more than something that we did. We'll call our girlfriends, we'll call our homeboys, we'll call our aunts, we'll call whoever. We're not calling nobody to nobody what we did. So it's like, that's the whole thing. So that is a stuck point, is that judgment. Oh, that's my auntie, Miss V Bell.
Hey, auntie.
We're not calling nobody to nobody what we did. And I'm a therapist, so I get to hear what people did. But we don't do that in our personal life. And that's the things that keep us stuck from addressing the stuff that Alonzo was talking about.
Indeed. All right. So Whitney said, I realized that I couldn't have a healthy relationship without having a healthy relationship with myself. Woo! That is the line of the night right there.
Yeah.
You need a healthy relationship with yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly. Self-love, self-compassion, all of that.
First, before you talk about relating to somebody else.
Yeah, that's why I love self-compassion, because it's like, it's really about you, and the love too. Same thing.
She said, I had to release people and my husband from my own strongholds and experiences. Mm-hmm. That you are standing mighty tall, Miss Whitney. Let me just say. That's
release them, because we do. Because I think sometimes when because there are situations in relationships that, well, not situations. In most situations in relationships, there's not one person that's wrong, right? There's usually things that we all do to contribute to the issues in the relationship. And so, but what she's talking about there is, well, at least what I'm imagining is those situations where we are holding grudges or we're holding things against people, and not releasing them.
Yes.
Because we're not releasing ourselves from the stuff that we did either, right? So it's kind of like we're just in that stuckness, essentially.
For sure. All right. Marjorie said, I think with these conversations, to properly convey the what, why, you must be quiet and have a moment to reflect. Set a time to meet, speak direct, and speak in love. Holding these issues in cause you to be reactive and your point is missed.
Yep.
Do you think it's healthy to do a check-in if a person has an issue with confrontation?
Yeah, I think so. I actually was just talking to a couple about this. So talking about like, okay, even when things are good, I think so. Of course, when things are bad, people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to feel worse.
Right.
When things are good, people want to talk about it because they don't want to feel bad. It's like it's always a reason not to talk about something. And so I think I was just helping them frame this, like, they're doing better, but then also there's things in the past that haven't been fully addressed that's still kind of lingering. And so it's like, do we talk about that or do we just keep going, kind of thing? And so what I told them is check in with yourself, because sometimes, and that's why I love therapy too, or any type of, if you do self-work as well, that if you work on some things, it'll create a ripple effect, which is like a phenomenon, right? So like let's say you work on self-compassion, and then you notice that, oh, you feel better about yourself and your self-esteem is higher because now you're not beating yourself up as much. So now in general, you feel better about yourself, right? So there's things that happen in therapy, or if you do your own self-work, that just kind of does that. And so what I tell them is not to worry about like going nitpicking every little thing, right? Because it's really no point to rehash something if it doesn't need to be rehashed. Right. But to know if it needs to be discussed is whether or not, if you think about it today, how much distress is it causing you internally, and how much is it playing out in your relationship?
Okay.
And that kind of gives a sense of, what to do about it. Now they're like, okay, so then how do we talk about it though, right? Kind of like to Marjorie's point. And so what I said to them is set the stage for it. I mean, at first it's going to be kind of awkward because you haven't done it, essentially. But if you want to just, embed like some type of just regular check-ins in your relationship. For some people, they can schedule it. Some people don't like scheduling things. They feel like it's not organic, but whatever works for you, just do that. And then say, okay, this is the time we're going to check in. And if it involves also things to bring in that maybe haven't been fully addressed, then everyone knows that's what we talked about, But if it's kind of brought up, kind of in like, oh, we're at the movies, about to watch Black Panther, you bringing it up, like that's not a good. So you want to really like set the stage for like, this is the moment to talk about it, or this is the environment to talk about it, so people are prepared. But the more you do it, it feels like a part of your relationship, and it doesn't feel like something that you're bringing it down or anything like that. Because you'll understand like we're stronger for it once we address these things. If it's still bothering us, right? If it's something that's not bothering you anymore and you're like past it, then just let it be past. But if it's still kind of coming up in some way, then that's kind of how you know if you should address it or be checking in about it.
Indeed. Love it. Etheria said, I love that you hold yourself accountable, Whitney. This is one of the keys to having healthy relationships. It takes away the blame game. All right. And Alonzo said he needs you as his therapist.
No, we can collaborate. We did some talking points today, so we can collaborate on some stuff.
Right. All right. So I heard you say, how much distress is it causing you internally, and how much distress is it causing in the relationship?
Yeah. I even have people. I mean, to make it easy, I have people just scale it like from 0 to 10. Like 0 is like I don't even think about it. I forgot about it even, and 10 is like, I think about it every day and I cry, like that's like a gauge, kind of thing. And then as far as how much it plays out in your relationship is, always start with the self first. And then from that self, think about how much does it impact your interaction with your partner, right? So meaning like, okay, if you're crying about it every day, let's say, and then they just so happen to come home and now you're kind of like not really talking to them, and you're kind of short, and you're kind of like trying to change the subject. You're just doing things kind of weird because you're in your feelings. Then that's playing out in your relationship because you weren't able to contain it and work through it on your own. Which you shouldn't necessarily have to do that if if it's about the relationship itself. But that tells you that if it's you're in the interaction and you're thinking about it and you're kind of like holding back, or you're like it's dictating how you're interacting, which wouldn't be the case normally, then that tells you how much is coming out into the relationship itself.
And it needs to be addressed.
And your partner might notice it too. Like, you all right? You acting, you acting funny. Then you be like, oh, okay. They notice, then that's another sign.
Right. All right. So Way More TV said, heal the child within and your journey will start to begin.
Yeah.
Nice.
Inner child. A lot of stuff comes from, that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other topic.
Inner child. There's a whole other thing about that. But yes, I agree.
Yes. All right. So Whitney responded to your theory. Don't lie to yourself. You can fix what you're not. You can't fix what you're not willing to address. Yes.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yep. That is very true.
Yeah.
All right. This has been great. I mean, we could talk some more, but we're trying to stay respectful of people's time.
I know, like, time doesn't change. It's like looking at midnight outside now.
It is at 9:30. So
yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this very important topic.
I had a great time. Thank you for having me.
For sure. So how can people connect?
Please feel free to. Thank you, Whitney. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. It is Heartfelt Counseling. Scrolling at the bottom there. Heartfelt Counseling Center. Actually, the past 3 weeks I've been talking about self-compassion, so it's fresh in my brain. I talk about my clients all the time too, so I'm always talking about it. But on social media, I talk about all different relationship topics and tips, and I usually promote if I'm doing things like this. So you can, check in there. If you want to schedule a consultation, like for actual services, so I do see individual and couples in the state of Florida. I do all virtual. Then you can always call the number on the screen. You can go on Instagram and find my consultation request, but probably easier just to call if you want to do that. And my website as well is there if you want to check out the website and schedule a consultation for individual or couples counseling. If you are a professional and you're not necessarily looking for, like I know Alonzo was saying or we were on a panel earlier and kind of talking about working together. If you're a professional therapist or just in another field and you want a therapist to come talk, then same thing. Just feel free to call me or reach out to me on social media somewhere, and I'll be more than happy to talk about anything collaborating, anything relationships. I am your person. Just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to do that as well. So just let me know.
Love it. So folks are chiming in. I love all of this.
That's my cousin.
Hi, cousin.
Cousin, yeah.
Yes, appreciate y'all being here. Great conversation. Yes, thank you, Beth, for being here.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you. So I invite you all to subscribe to Conversations with Nicole if you have not done so already. On YouTube in particular, I'm trying to reach 4,000 viewing hours by November 31st. That is
hours or
hours.
Oh, wow. Just for people watching your videos.
4,000 viewing hours. So just let them play. You don't have to necessarily watch them.
Oh, Nicole.
We're just talking, right? We just having a conversation. So just let them play. But no, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being on here. Yes, Martha, great conversation with Melissa.
My fellow Haitian sister.
Yes.
Thanks, Whitney.
Nice. Thank you, Whitney. Appreciate it. All right. Anything you have coming up?
No, I had tonight was jam packed. I had the panel with you earlier, and I had this. I not this month. I think I have something next month. I'll probably post about it then.
All right. Well, y'all
follow me. Y'all find it.
Yeah, I was about to say, be sure to follow her on Instagram. She is on. Don't you do like a Tuesday talk or something?
Yeah, I do Monday, Tuesday,
Friday.
Like I'll be on there.
She give you some gems, some nuggets. In the story, in the on the
post, the reel. I'm trying to get it, get it out there.
The reels are real. I get it.
Thank you.
I get it. But yeah, y'all definitely follow her.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes. We see you, E. Thanks for being here, even though you're late. It's okay. Better late.
Watch the replay. We need them views.
We do. All right, good people. We are going to catch y'all later. Have a great rest of the evening, and we'll see y'all next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.